The industry directly after the crisis was very eager to learn from their mistakes. They were accepting higher capital requirements. They were even pushing for new regulations. But very quickly, the industry passed again to business as usual. They started to fight against harder requirements for them. And in the US, there is even a lot of push to rewind or to cancel some regulations that have been set up after the crisis. So that's from the industry point of view. From the regulators' point of view, regulators have, of course, been very active on that. They have initiated a whole series of regulations to address the issues that were one of the reasons for the crisis. And they did that in three waves, you could say. The first one was transparency for the regulator himself, so basically mainly around trades and deals that were between the banks, where the regulator didn't have any transparency at all. In Europe, it was the EMIR regulation and the FINFRAG in Switzerland, which addressed that. The next big wave was transparency again for the clients, and also client protection, of course, which is again MiFID II in Europe and FIDLEG in Switzerland. And there is now a third wave, which is more technical, with GDPR, which goes more into the technicalities, the data protection of the client. This technical regulations are still continuing. There is still some in the pipelines in Switzerland and in the European Union. On top of that, of course, there is certain trends that are emerging regarding regulations. One is the already mentioned the very technical regulations. GDPR is one of those, and a credit with another one in Europe, which defines the prescription for the banks regarding the reporting down to the field level almost, so technical field level. Then, of course, in Switzerland, the regulations usually follow the European ones with a certain time lag, are more liberal, so they leave more freedom for the industry to regulate themselves. The Swiss regulator looks for equivalence with the European regulators, of course, to have, of course, an easier interaction within Europe. And finally, there is, of course, the new technologies coming up, the new trends, like in technology, like blockchain, like cryptocurrencies, like fintech and fintech companies. And there is, of course, also regulations around that, or it is being drafted. It's at a very early stage right now. On one hand, the regulator sees the need to have those areas regulated, because there is more and more money flowing into that. On the other hand, of course, they don't want to shut down the evolution and the development on those areas, so they are very careful in regulating that. Where what we see is that there is one issue, that this is still being regulated on a very local level. So the regulators are not talking a lot with each other about those new technologies and regulation of them. Although, of course, blockchain and cryptocurrencies are global events. So here I see that there will, in the future, we will need a much more coordination between the different regulators. The main challenges are in Switzerland FIDLEG. That's basically this MiFID regulation, this client transparency and protection regulation, which is already enforced in Europe. And here the main challenge is to embed that in a strategic setup on one hand, and also since most of Swiss banks have also European clients, to have a right combination of the European MiFID regulation and the Swiss specific FIDLEG regulation. And that's something which is keeping the compliance officers up at night, basically, right now. In Europe, the MiFID regulation is, as I said, enforced, but there's still a lot to do regarding automation, regarding optimization of the setup. When you look at the regulations, like the most recent one, FIDLEC and MiFID II, then you see that there's two things that are approached by those regulations: a robustness of the technical setup, and client centricity, or putting the client in the center of attention regarding transparency and regarding protection. And that's basically the two main topics in banking in general anyways. Technology is moving fast, so banks have to deal with technology. It should be on the very top of their list to deal with technology. And the client is, of course, in the very center of the bank's business, so they have to deal with that anyways. In other words, if they're taking that seriously, if they're setting their goals strategically to address those main items of the regulations, they are also building up a very robust basis for their own business. And that's of course something which will help them going forward in their client interaction.